welcome to episode 28 of the WION Sports Broadband Edition with me, Digvijay Singhdeo. Now, it's been close to 2 months since world sport shut down due to the coronavirus pandemic. But there are some encouraging signs coming in from Europe about football actually resuming. I'm joined now by an old friend of ours here on WION, Welsh football coach and pundit Matt Holland. Matt, how are things over in Thailand where you are? Because in India, we've seen a sort of an explosion in the last 3 or 4 days of cases, but not that much damage is what I'm reading in Bangkok.
Yeah, I mean, here it's quite interesting. It seems to be pretty stable from the information that gets shared to us on a daily basis. I think the main point is that there's very low number of fatalities, only around 50 plus, I think. So we are lucky in that respect. And I have to say, I think the Thai community are really adhering to trying to help each other. There's no official lockdown, shall we say, like most countries, but there's a nightly curfew. Large sort of venues, shopping malls, stadiums, etc. are, of course, out of action. But most people are staying pretty much at home and doing what they need to and what they can do to the best of their ability, I guess.
Okay, so you're a footballer, and footballers are usually outdoor persons. So how have you been adjusting? Have you reinvented yourself as a coach?
I'd definitely say yes. I've gone through a little bit of a transition, a lot of reflection during the last few months from my last club in Thailand. Took some time out during the off season to go home to the UK. And I've had something that's been sort of in the pipeline for 2 or 3 years, actually, in terms of more of a formal consultancy program or project rather. I've opened that now during the last 6 weeks. I'm working with a lot of clients, players in the US, coaches at home in the UK. There's a couple of coaches in India, some in Malaysia. So there's people that I'm working with ultimately all over the world now, and trying to maximize how they can get to that next level in football as many desire.
Okay, that's some good news, but there's some good news coming in from Europe as well, especially your part of the world, which is England. Lots of positive signals that the English game could resume. In fact, the government, ministers and the government have gone on and said it could boost morale as well. The question is, Matt, is that a wise step?
Oh, very difficult question. It's funny, isn't it, how people, they, for want of a better word, they castrate footballers and people in the profession for the money that they earn. But ultimately, they are the people that are needed most, I guess. Now, they want them to be playing again with safety measures, of course, but they want the game to take them away from the current situation that we're in. And a wise step, I think there's so many different permutations because of things that, who wins the league, who doesn't, who gets relegated, who doesn't, which I'm sure we'll discuss later on. But I think the answer to a wise step would be we'd have to take a very cautious step. A very, very health and safety, in my opinion at least, is most important.
Matt, a lot of players, including the likes of Sergio Aguero, have actually come out and said that they're not too comfortable going out there and playing. What we are seeing right now is perhaps the prioritizing of finances than safety.
Yeah, and I think, most of these guys have got families, haven't they? So, I've since I was over with you guys during the World Cup a few years ago, I've got an extended family of my own and a little one. And the first couple of weeks this happened, from a personal perspective, I was petrified. I didn't want anybody to go near him. I was just panicking all the time about, is he going to be okay? Not so much are we going to be okay, but would he be okay as a little one? He's only about 18 months old. So this was in my mind. I've since gone past that chapter now, positively, may I add. But others are still in the same boat. They're still worrying and concerned. So I think that would be the case for lots of these players with younger families.
Yes, and football is a contact sport, Matt. Let's face it, football is a contact sport. A lot of Premier League doctors with clubs have written to the Premier League saying that they aren't too happy with this opening as well. What are the I think it's a twofold question. One is that yes, the money is there, significant amount of money, clubs are bleeding. But the other side, at what cost? Why should you go out and play at what cost? As you said, players have families, football's a contact sport. You know that even to start training, you cannot just train with 30 people. There are 30 people in the squad. There have to be people around, the coaching staff, physio, looking at about 50, 60 people. So you're exposing 50, 60 people and their families if you start resuming training.
Yeah, and at that level, you've got to consider the training grounds where people are. You might have 6 to 10 ground staff. You might have 4 or 5 in the kitchen, of course, in the canteen. You've got office staff at the training ground now. At some training grounds, it's important to consider the under-21 teams are also sharing. So it's not just one group of 30 players. It could be 60, it could be 90 if the academy are based there in terms of an under-18s. But we do know in recent days they have postponed those fixtures. So I'm guessing most of those won't be training, just to clarify a number. But I guess that in that respect, there is still, you could still hit 80, 90, 100 people. And from the doctor's element, of course, medically, they're going to do the right thing. They're not going to put themselves in jeopardy and their own reputation. And I understand that too, because I just think nobody really has the answer.
But also, it's ultimately boiling down to the money, isn't it? Because the clubs are already bleeding. Many have, controversially put their staff on the government furlough scheme. But it's around a 750 million pound broadcasting deal money, which won't come if the season isn't finished. Ultimately, that's what is pushing the clubs, isn't it? The clubs have to go out there and want to play this beat behind closed doors just to finish the season because of that money.
Yeah, listen, to the average man on the street, and I guess especially you and I chatting, that type of money is ridiculous amounts. And it's also a lot of money to lower league clubs. If we just look at the Premier League clubs, look at the finances in the game. The transfer fees alone during the last 3 to 4 or 5 years have skyrocketed. I remember, Zidane going to Real Madrid during a time which was, I think, the world record at the time. But it's more than double that. The new transfer record would probably be 3 or 4 times that now, to be honest. So, things have moved forward. And I guess if this situation hadn't have happened, I'm sure we would have seen a world record transfer broken during the summer for maybe one of the front three of Liverpool, as an example, or Mbappe. And that type of money probably wouldn't have been blinked at. So, if you say Mbappe is going to cost 200 million and we're going to lose 750, it's 25% of it, but that's on one player. We're talking globally. So it is a lot of money. But I think that people who are complaining a lot, of course they are bleeding, of course they're losing money, but there's still a lot of money in the game.
But hang on, Matt. You're talking about Mbappe being 200 million, but today haven't the values significantly falling? I mean, Liverpool were reportedly in for Timo Werner around 50 million euros. But even now, they've decided to wait because they don't know if they can pay that amount of money. The transfer fees have fallen drastically right now. I mean, right now, what a player would have cost, say, 100 million pounds, 100 million euros, could be on the market for 40 million. But will clubs have that much amount of money to even come up with that figure?
It's certainly a challenge. I mean, when I was just trying to explain the fact that the actual value of the number, at 200, say, before COVID compared to 750 losing it. Of course, I think the transfer window will change a lot now coming in. We may not in general. We may not see a lot of investment, but the contracts probably won't change. That's the difference. While the player's transfer value drops, his contract value doesn't, and we can see the fine details of how that will grow. How that would be affected over a period of time, because if Pogba's on a 60-70 million pound contract, then he's not going to be let go for much less than that, because there's lots to be dealt with within those contractual agreements. So it's certainly challenging. It's a lot of money, to be fair. I feel sorry for the lower level clubs. I've not been part of a League One or a League Two club, but I was part of a really good Championship club with good owners, where we got paid on time. We didn't have to even think about. But even I know some of those Championship clubs are furloughing and using the government scheme. and it's going to be challenging. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. But I think positive attitude towards change within the global game, and maybe embracing a tough situation. I think many people are going to come through stronger, and potentially the game's going to be better for it, as crazy as that may sound speaking today.
Okay. UEFA has already postponed Euros, but they've also said that wherever possible, they would prefer the action or the league to be decided on the pitch. If that doesn't happen, like we've seen in France, then go with points per game to decide who wins the title. Now, in Dutch football, they decided it was too close, so they decided that there will be no champion this year with Alkmaar and Ajax on the same number of points, just goal difference. But you go back to England, where you're from, and in the Premier League, would it be a travesty not to award Liverpool the title? At least, they have such a huge difference in terms of them and the team in second place, but at least that's not a problem at the moment with 9 matches to go.
Yeah, for me, Liverpool, for them to lose the title now would be unbelievable. I certainly can't see that, even if they had a drastic injury problem during a number of games. So, I think it's very clear in the Premier League that Liverpool are going to be the title winners of this year, regardless of this current situation. However, in this situation, of course, the argument is, do you just hand it to them or not? Because there's so much to play for at the bottom end. So I think that's the grey area. It's easy to give Liverpool the title, but it's not easy to decide on the bottom places right now, because
that's exactly the point I want to bring you in on, Matty, because that's exactly my next question. I just thought, let's just butt in and tell our viewers what the problem is. So I actually got it down here. 8 points. 8 points separates teams 15 to 20. 8 points with about 9 to 10 matches to go is about, 3 wins? So you could have a situation where you begin the series, you begin the league again, you have one round of fixtures, the entire, order could change, and then you could again have a stop. If another round of this COVID-19 pandemic breaks out, or some teams get affected like we had in March. That's why it's so close. And let's face it, clubs are selfish. Nobody wants to go down and lose that big Premier League money as well. So the block right now is happening from these lower clubs.
Yeah, it's also difficult. You mentioned money a lot. I listened to an extract, I think, from a radio interview in the UK, saying that if some of these clubs were given 60, 70, 80 million guaranteed to go down, they probably won't bat an eyelid. But again, I think it's just don't forget, within those games that are left, there's 8-9 rounds. There's potential 6-pointers there of teams playing against each other. So, very quickly it can change. And maybe it doesn't take 3 games. Maybe it took 2. Maybe it'll take 2 if they play each other, for example. So, that's difficult. And then we are accustomed in the Premier League to have, these euphoric days of the great escapes, etc., etc. There's been a number since the Premier League began where things have come down to the last day, even a title win to the last day a few years ago between Manchester United and Manchester City. So, these guys that are down the bottom will always believe that that's possible still. And they want to give every chance they got, because being in the Premier League versus not doesn't just affect the club and its money, it affects individual careers, player contracts, player profiles, the endorsements that some may or may not get, and the coach. The coach having a relegation on his CV compared to not having one. So I think it's challenging.
Okay, but this is an unprecedented situation in world sport. Let's all admit that. We all know that there is a problem. Even the Olympics have got postponed. That's the scale of this pandemic. There is a significant argument which says that clubs have played over 75% of their matches. And if the season stops now, why not use the table? How is it unfair on teams who've not had a good season, who are stuck right down there in relegation zones? Well, some would say that they've earned it. They haven't played well through the season. What can they do in the last 7 or 8 games?
Yeah, and I think that's also a valid statement and an argument that, they've had 3/4 of the season to deal with this already. And they haven't, and they are down there for a reason. But I think, people will play the game, won't they? I think that they will say, yeah, well, we can turn our form around. We've had a break. We've had a regroup during the situation. The team morale is better in a difficult situation. I think, we're gonna step on. We've revisited during this time off. So, we believe now that 7 or 8 games left to play, we can go and push. And unfortunately, proving that right or wrong is difficult. It's nigh on impossible, even based on their current form up until today. I listened to a podcast regarding Norwich City, probably the best Premier League team that will get relegated, because they play really well, but unfortunately they do get picked off because of a little bit of naivety in the youth. But again, who's to say that during this time now, when we speak about this contact, who's to say if players start that they're going to go as full in terms of contact of getting near people? So they may not frighten Norwich, and Norwich may pop a few teams off the pitch, and that's 9 points, 10 points, 12 points, and they may be out of it. So, it's very, very interesting, it's intriguing actually to think about all these different permutations.
Matty, in the second division in England, the championship, you also have this concept of a playoff into the Premier League. There's another school of thought which says, stop the season where it is right now. You've decided who the champion is because there's a huge gap. But as far as the relegation places go, wait till things improve and then have a relegation playoff between teams 15 to 20, which are tightly bunched. You think that could be a satisfactory conclusion to this entire saga? Because let's face it, the clubs who will go down right now, if the season is ended on points per game or whatever, they could go to court.
Yeah, and I think, listen, there's lots of relegation, there's lots of playoff situations, isn't there, in world football? The A-League in Australia, they play a normal league, and then they go into Scotland divided for many a year. I'm sure there's a playoff situation in Holland, I think, whereby they have playoffs between the last one to get relegated and the third one to get promoted. They have that type of playoff, if I'm correct. So, and let's look at India, for example. The ISL plays a regular season, and then of course they play playoffs to be a champion. So, if playoffs are accepted in those types of circumstances, instead of a straight 38 games, 25 games, whatever it may be, 26 games, I think that they should consider that as an option. I don't think any option should be ruled out if the priority would be to play the games and at least finish the season in some format. And I think everybody would be more happy with that. But let's be honest, there's not going to be a perfect scenario, and somebody is going to feel hard done by, and somebody will be hard done by. This is fact.
Yes, but this is an unprecedented situation. See, there's a flip side to all this, There's a flip side to playing matches in closed doors, or as they're saying in England, perhaps play in neutral venues. The problem here is, look at Germany. Germany said, and the Bundesliga said, we're going to move towards a restart. But last week, you've got 3 players from Cologne who've tested positive. It's a bit of Russian roulette at the moment, because the virus is not contained. The virus is still out there. And because football is a contact sport, because football has so many players in close contact with each other during training or during a match, it's team sports in which the virus could actually, keep manifesting and spreading like wildfire. That's why I call it Russian roulette.
I think the other element to consider would potentially be that nobody's sort of restarting at the moment. But Germany will. And if things are okay for Germany, I think you're going to see a domino effect of leagues go bang, 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 bang. And they're all open pretty quickly. I think if Germany will, of course, they have to have guidance from their respective governments. But I think that'll be part of it. I mean, Korea is going to start out our way, of course, coming away from Europe. They'll be starting also next week. So it is Russian roulette. It's a big gamble, and unfortunately, if many people and many players are going to go down and there's a fatality, which we hope to all avenues that won't happen, then of course the German government and the Bundesliga top officials are going to come hook, line and sinker from the German public and probably the global public. But ultimately, I guess it's us that are in sport, and there are people out there that don't enjoy sport and they have their life, and they just want health and safety. But us sport lovers, of course, is part of our life. It's part of our daily life. It's part of our conversations with friends and family and work colleagues, and the banter that can go on in an office. Or, it gives you a kickstart to your week, or you look forward to an event that you're going to because you're going with friends or your family or your children, in terms of first experiences. So I think Germany are making this brave step as a kickstart. And I guess after the first 1, 2, 3 rounds that we see that many, if nobody is in any danger, I think people go, oh, maybe this is okay now. Maybe we need to start looking at it and stop panicking so much. But of course, I don't mean that in not panic about the pandemic. It's clearly people have lost their lives, and that's really important to consider always.
Yes, look at Spain, for instance. They've sort of come up with protocols for training. Initially, when the players get back, you're going to have individual training sessions, then perhaps in groups of 2 and 3, then progressing to a proper team training session. How long do you think, Maddie, it's going to take for players to build up to peak fitness, to match fitness levels, considering that they haven't done much apart from kick a ball around at home and use their home gyms for 2 months?
Right. This is also a really good question, Diggy, for the viewers, because I also hope that there's people of professional level out there going to be watching what we're talking about, but also secondly to that, people at the grassroots level. You see, you've got 2 different aspects. I'll give an example in terms of Indian footballers. Sunil Chetri is on a very good contract. He could afford to put a system in his home that is far greater than most of the other players in the I-League, as an example. The boys that maybe in the northeast, they only have the beauty of the mountains and the roads to get around up there. So, the fitness levels are going to vary massively between players. And it's also, I think now, if anybody shouldn't be getting a pay cut during the teams, it's probably the conditioning coaches and the analysts, because those 2 jobs, they're the ones that got to pump the information through to the players now. The conditioning coach, he can't give one program. And I've seen many programs, many players across the world share to me what the club shared and what do you think. And everybody's going with, or most people are going with some standard form of program. It's not enough, Diggy. Players have different levels. Players lose fitness quicker than others. Players have different mentalities to really train and take care of themselves better than others. So it won't be enough. So ultimately, to answer your question, how long it will take them, I think it's still going to take really a solid 4 weeks at least, in terms of another pre-season, if you like, to get people up and running. And then you're still not going to have everybody. We're not considering people maybe breaking down, for example. That could happen. But I think 4 weeks, give or take, a week or 2 either side, I think is going to be probably the ballpark number of weeks, shall we say, to get them up and running.
Okay, so we're probably looking at mid-June, or perhaps just after that, perhaps the last week of June, to get players up to scratch and for leagues to resume, according to what you just said. But say a situation arises where everyone bites the bullet. There, as you said, is the bang bang effect. Let's start. Then do you think that the players will have to be tested at least every 2 or 3 days to ensure that they stay healthy and they don't infect others when the action resumes?
Well, I think it's, a question would be in terms of testing, because they're around. I think people are still going in to do their jobs, aren't they? Some offices are still open in some countries. They're not totally shut down. Some offices are still maybe 20, 30, 40 people staggered, on a staggered basis. So I think for the players to be tested every 2 or 3 days, we'd have to ask the question of, are people in offices getting tested 2 or 3 days? And the answer would be no at the moment. So I think providing that, if the league is restarted and then it doesn't allow players to go here, there and everywhere, they just from home into the training ground, back home, then ultimately that sort of semi-lockdown and, a release from the lockdown a little bit would be okay, I guess. But of course, I'm not medically qualified to know even more depth for me saying that, but this is just my personal opinion. I think there'd be ways to do it. They could train in a group, even if they train in a group of 3 or 4, if they're going to get it, they're going to get it. So, if they're gonna, if it's 3 or 4, or if it's 30 as a group together, all mingling, and they're still pretty much contained to that group. Now, it would, if it expands to the household, like an injury, a player could suffer a hamstring injury. He doesn't play, he doesn't train for 4 weeks. So if he gets it, then he's at home. That player potentially doesn't train with the team until he's right. And his parents, his family may not go out and about. So I think there should be. Well, I would like to think they're hot on the collar in terms of considering all these different arrangements that could happen. But look, some of these training grounds, well, not some, all of the training grounds now, they're not public fields anymore. They're private sort of environments. You can't go in without security. You can't get easy access. You've got to be able to go in and out of the training ground. Only certain people are allowed in. So it's not like the public are going to be walking their dogs next to the pitches. It's only confined to those people. So I guess that's a big consideration, is how restricted they can make that training ground. Maybe they don't eat there, for example, so the chefs don't need to go in. Maybe they split certain rooms up in terms of changing rooms. Sorry. So I think that's something to consider for sure.
Okay, final question to you, Matty. The entire sporting ecosystem around the world seems to have changed. There are going to be new protocols which come in. Everyone's talking of what the new normals will be. What do you think are the lessons for football from this pandemic? You never thought all this could happen. Do you think this is time for football to reflect, pause, look at the inflated ecosystem and think, let's just scale down a bit? This has given us an opportunity to sort of, re-emphasize the artificial bubble that's been on.
Yeah, I certainly think that, and I think I mentioned just before, even in terms of you asking me about myself, and have I reinvented myself? Ultimately, I think this is a time to embrace the new normal. There's not going to be a light switch effect, and I hope people who are listening understand this from a completely positive aspect, which is how I am approaching as much as I can in life now, because I think it's important for my family. From my perspective, there's no, all right, COVID's gone now, it's fine. The new normal is already here. That's the first thing. The second thing is that how we come out of this, we still have to be cautious. Football has to reflect in terms of, the money is in football because it's there. There's that much money in the game at the top end. That's what happens. So I think what's important is they just try and help, at least from a pyramidical perspective, of those that below them, the masses, shall we see, how can they help them? But again, it's very tricky, because you do have some chairmen and some owners who are not so clever in the lower league clubs also, that they haven't done right by players even when there's no COVID. So I think it is a time for reflection, potentially more regulations, and to make sure that people. Ultimately, budgets, and some leagues have salary caps. Sometimes I agree with it, sometimes I don't. But again, people can still go into debt and still have problems and fold when they have a salary cap. So, but I certainly think it's a time for reflection, because ultimately we can't do too much now, can we? We're all working or trying to work, but it's different to the time before COVID. So I think during this time, everybody should try and maximise the opportunity, whereby you're not going to fall behind anybody else in terms of competition by having a really good look at ourselves, a company, for example, or an environment such as professional sport.
Okay, but the question remains, Matty, can football take a step back and just be normal? I think that's the huge multi-million-dollar question. We can still see the transfer fees reducing. We can still see a 200 million player going for, say, 70 or 80. Someone still will have the money. What happens to the contract figures? Will the players no longer want to take those £400,000, €400,000 salaries? That's also the question. So it's a lot of things. It's a lot of things, and sadly we're not going to get the answer right now. But I think right now, with world sport completely shut, I think, as you said, it's time for people in football as well to think which way they're going, and hopefully they go in the right way. Thank you so much, Matt Holland. Stay safe. Look out for the young kids at home, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Diggy. Stay safe, and everybody at home listening also.